Hi everyone. A warm welcome to today's remote working webinar presented by Hugh Valentine. We actually have over 200 people joining us today. In light of the current COVID-19 situation, we've put together this webinar, which covers a wide spectrum of topics relating to how you can quickly deploy Microsoft Teams to facilitate remote working across your business. We invite you to ask questions throughout the webinar. You can do this by clicking on the top right icon with the question mark in it. I will then publish that question and hand it over to Hugh at the end of every slide. Without further ado, I'll pass you over to Hugh Valentine.
Thank you, Lisa. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. We're looking forward to doing this presentation and hopefully helping you guys out. So as of Monday, our entire workforce is working successfully from Microsoft Teams. So this is something that as an organization, we've been using a lot. We've built best practices. We've been using Microsoft Teams heavily. And as from Monday, every single employee is now working remotely using this platform. So what we hope from today is we can share some tips with yourselves, and we can go through some of the tips and how to use Microsoft Teams. So the topics we'd like to focus on, we'd like to go through the best way to license Microsoft Teams. We're then going to jump into an overview of Microsoft Teams. So this is for anybody that has not used Teams in the past or are looking to start using Teams. That's something we're going to start helping people out with and showing you how you can license it. We've then got some tips on how to quickly deploy Teams. We would then go through a process of how you can map your departments to remote working. We then want to offer some tips around governance, some quick tips, and then we have a special Teams training that we want to cover off, and then finally questions and answers at the very end of today. The takeaways we'd like to get for you guys today would be to understand the licenses, how you can deploy Teams optimally, how to support your departments with this adoption, which I'm sure many of you guys are looking to try and get this platform rolled out, how we can make sure that the platform is secure and governed, and then finally how we could use this system as a Teams voice platform. So the very first step in here is, how is Microsoft Teams licensed? So Teams is included for free. You can download the product as a consumer. You can get that, anybody in the world can now download Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft have been doing a lot of incentives basically to help people start to use this platform. One incentive from Microsoft that people would find very interesting is that Microsoft are offering 50 free E1 licenses for 6 months. So if you guys currently don't have Office 365 at all, and you're looking to try and start using Microsoft Teams, this offer from Microsoft will be a fantastic offer that you guys can start to look at. So what that basically means is you can get the full suite of Office 365 tools over the next 6 months, and one of those includes the Microsoft Teams add-on. So if you guys aren't currently using Office 365 and you'd like to take advantage of the E1 licenses, then you can get in touch with us after this, and we can then help you get that deployed. So to reiterate, if you currently have Office 365, whether that's a Microsoft 365 or an Office 365 license, you will have Microsoft Teams available to you. So it's just a matter of switching that application on, and then you can start to use it. There's 2 other licenses which we'll cover off at the very end. One of these is called audio conferencing. Audio conferencing will enable people to join Teams sessions via a phone rather than just having to use a web browser. So this is good to start enabling people to join your meetings remotely. And the business voice is basically a full phone system that's available within there. So the first step really is, what is Microsoft Teams? So for anybody who hasn't used Microsoft Teams is basically the new modern way of working. So Microsoft have worked on a lot of processes and they've built a lot of investment into developing Microsoft Teams. And I think the easiest way to show you guys what it is to actually jump into the interface and give you a demonstration. So the first thing that Microsoft Teams does is that it basically replaces Skype for Business. So anybody who in the past who's used Skype for Business, they'll be very aware of how this platform works. It basically enables us to start to do things like send instant messages. So when I load up Teams, I've got an individual chat window here, and I can then send a chat here to Steve Davis, and I can say, hello, Steve, how are you doing? So obviously much better than Skype. And one thing is that we have this conversation history here. So I can scroll through the previous conversations, which is something we were never able to do in Skype previously. Whereas with this platform, it's very easy to see the previous conversations. And then it's very easy to start a conversation with that person and see the chats you've had with them before. From a remote working perspective and starting to work from homes, which is obviously something very prevalent at the moment, we can come into here and we've got the ability then to select a video call. So a video call would allow me to do a video conversation with the person on the other end. So if they have a web camera set up, we can start to do video chats. We can also just do an audio chat. So basically like phone calling your members of staff. So effectively now we've started to get people working from home. This chat basically allows us to have those ad hoc conversations with people. Perhaps you've picked up a call for them, or you just need to ask them a quick question. That's exactly why we'd start to use the chat functionality within here. The next part of Microsoft Teams, and this is the main functionality that's been developed, is the actual Teams itself. So down the left-hand side, every team that I'm a member of will appear here. And we see Teams works very well for three main areas. The first area that it works well for is looking at departmental functions. And that's something that we'll go into more detail and explain how you can map those departments and get the most out of that platform. But ultimately, the idea would be we can create a team and we can invite everybody in that department into that team. And we can then start to do things like replace internal email. So what we found very successfully is that the Teams platform can replace internal emails that are sent out. So within here, I have the ability to start a new conversation. So I can tag a team. So that effectively is basically sending like an email to everybody in the team and getting their attention. So I could, as a quick example, I could say, we are working remotely. Where is month end up to? And as soon as I hit enter, that will now pop up on all of the different notifications. So effectively, that's like sending them an email. If they've got Teams on their phone or any other devices, that's going to pop up to everyone in the team. If I only need to get one or two members of the team's attention, I can just type those individuals in here and I can say, where is the expenses report up to? And now only Chris and Dougie will be notified. The advantage of this, however, means that everyone in the team is aware that I've chased Chris and Dougie. So perhaps if somebody else in the team was going to chase Dougie for the expenses report as well, he can straight away see that I've done that. And we've got some social components in here where they could indicate they've seen that, or potentially even reply and say, I need that to Dougie. So effectively, the whole concept of Microsoft Teams is about the tagging. So I can tag the entire team if it's important and I need to do an announcement for everyone, or I can tag an individual and I can then get their attention. So we can see that Dougie's responded back to say it will be done today. So a big part of this process is basically trying to get to replace the way you would work currently. A lot of these interactions, if you're not using Microsoft Teams, will be emails that are sent out, or perhaps conversations that you would have in the office. Obviously, conversations that you have in the office, that's going to be very difficult now. And you'll probably find it's going to be much more effective to start to look at Microsoft Teams and this tagging capability. The other thing that we could do with Teams is we can just send a general message. So if it wasn't important and it was just an information piece, we could say in here, without tagging anyone, can we please look at the policy for finance? And that's just an information. So it'll show up as bolded here, but it's not going to pop up on anyone's devices. So I'd say the main takeaway from this is if you're starting to use Microsoft Teams, get into the habit of using the tags effectively. Tag the entire team if it's important, and then tag an individual if you're only after one or two people rather than everybody. And then obviously don't tag anyone if it's not important and it's just a piece of information you'd want to share. The next concept of Teams is it's all about the threads. So Whereas if you use WhatsApp, it's basically just a message after message. But what you can see here with my conversations, they're actually grouped together. So that the idea of Teams is not just to continually post new messages, but it's to create a thread and then group those conversations. So then when you're working as a team, it's very easy to see the different strands of conversations and jump into the relevant one to you. We can hit the A at the very bottom, and that allows us to craft a more detailed message. So this is like sending a more detailed email. So in the subject, I can put an example here of month end report. Can everyone review? And you'll see that this is larger and bolder. I can then tag the entire team. So I can come to this section and I could say, can I get your feedback on this, please? And then I can use the paperclip icon at the bottom, and this basically will show all of the files that exist within the team. So we'll come to the file section in more detail later on, but it's really possible to move your files into this platform as well, and then you can all very easily work from the same area. So you see here now I've created a thread. It's clear that this is its own conversation, and if I hit reply under here, I can say I can look at this after 2. And then so on and so forth. And when we start to have a really busy thread with lots of communications, these threads become critical in terms of being able to manage the different workloads that are happening. The next part of Microsoft Teams is the files functionality. So another challenge that you may find if you've started to work from home and you haven't been doing it before, if you're accessing your files on a file server, it will be very, very difficult or cumbersome to access those files. You may be looking to try and get VPN solutions in place, or you might be trying to find other solutions in which you could do that. Every team that we create, this finance team as an example, will also create a files section within it. And a lot of companies are actually moving their files now away from a file server, and they're starting to use the files functionality within here. And what that means is, first of all, I can use this synchronize functionality. So the synchronize functionality will create a folder on my PC, which you can see here, called Demo Finance. And I can access those files exactly like a network drive. So all the stuff that you're used to in terms of being able to browse the files, we can actually see those in a similar interface. But what that means is I can take those files and I can work on them offline. I could work on them on a train. This little cloud icon here next to the file means that I can only view it online. But a green tick would also appear if I would right clicked and I can choose always keep on this device. And that then creates a synchronized copy. So the files section here is really key. If you guys are struggling at the moment to find a way to access your files, you can start to consider to move your files and folders over into this platform. Perhaps in the interim step, you're looking for a quick way to get the files in. This would be recommended, but I would advise for anyone who's looking to try and potentially move the file server, that would be something you would consider over time. I wouldn't recommend today you just copy all your files and folders off a file server, because it needs to be a considered approach. So that is something I would recommend. Maybe you put your key files in for now, but over time, perhaps look at a longer term strategy for moving the rest in.
Hugh, can I just interject quickly?
Yep.
We have a question about how do you control all the noise in the general channel, or do you lock down the general channel to team owner and then create a correspondence channel within each team?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So finance, as an example, have lots of different components within there. So I've got every team that's created has a general tab. So we can go into that general tab and we can basically see all of this conversation. So that's good for when we need to get everyone in the team. What we can do is we can click the 3 dots here and we can choose add channel. And the add channel basically allows me to create a channel that will break the communications up. So I might say here, we need a channel for finance management reports. In the privacy section, I've got 2 types. I can have a standard one, which is still accessible to everyone in the team, or I can create a private one, which can be restricted to just certain people in finance. So that's really good for like finance areas where you might have a salary folder. So I can bring Dougie just straight into this, and only Dougie and I now will have access to this finance management reports. What that means, though, is we've now got a clean conversations area. That basically means that nobody apart from Dougie and I at the moment, or anyone else I choose to invite, I can say, where is the pay up to? And then that really is how we would manage that. So if you've got lots of communications going on in the general tab and you're looking to try and break those up, I would recommend we create channels, maybe just a public channel if it's just to break the communications up, or a private channel if it's something where there's sensitive data in there. By creating a private channel, we can also create a private files area as well. So those two pieces of functionality will work together and you will have a restricted file section. The next thing with Microsoft Teams really is we have the ability to have different tabs across the top. So lots of people at the moment, we've had lots of requests about where can I start to share information. We're working from home. I want to put some announcements. I want to put some guides for people on how we're approaching coronavirus. There's a top example here called Wiki. So Wiki basically allows us to build an internal knowledge base. So that's good for finance as an example. They can build a section in here to say, how do we update finance records? And they can then start to build that internal knowledge base. But as an example, we could really quickly say, if we come in to click new page, I could call it COVID-19, and I could say working from home. And I can then start to put some details in here. Perhaps you've got some policies about how that's going to work, that kind of thing. And we'll talk some policies about this later on as well. We can also have different tabs across the top. So if there's a web page that you use all the time as a department, we can actually pin those tabs. So I've got one here for Google, which basically allows me to access Google. And if I click on the KPI reports one, that will open up an Excel spreadsheet. So lots of people say, we use this spreadsheet all the time. Can I just pin that as a tab across the top? So KPI reports is really available there nice and easily.
Hugh, one more question around the file section. How does it update if you've synchronized and then you work off the document locally? Does it automatically update as you go, or do you need to actually synchronize it again once you've finished working on it locally?
No, it's automatic. So if I go back to the files section in here, what will happen is when those files sync, you'll see I've got a green tick next to it and a cloud icon. As soon as I make a change to one of these files, this will change to an arrow symbol. It will then upload automatically the changes into the cloud, and then everyone will be able to have access to them. So it's a completely automated sync. If someone else makes a change to the file at the same time as yourself, it will come up and say that there's been a conflict, and it will actually help you merge the changes together. If two people open the same file while it's both online, you can actually work on that file together. So it enables you then to do real-time collaboration on a file. So that's really good for presentations and proposals that you might be working on. You won't be locked out of the files like you would on a file server. So we were covering the tabs across the top. So we have the capability to have as many tabs as we want in here. So we would recommend that you look through the tabs, and if you're using systems already like Planner or Trello or anything else like that, we can actually go ahead and add these in. And it just makes it easier for that department to say, right, here's actually the tabs that we will work from. And I can just find those very easily in my day-to-day role. The other thing with tabs is that we've got different tools that are available. So another tool that we're finding really handy at the moment for people that are starting to work from this remote way of working is we have here one called Plan. So there's a product that exists within Office 365 called Planner. The Planner product basically allows us to create a set list of buckets. So if your team's trying to figure out how do we start working remotely, how do we manage tasks that we'd usually talk to each other over the desk, Planner, which can be added by clicking Planner in the Add tab option, basically allows us to create a number of different tasks within here. So I can create a task here called Teams Rollout maybe. I can choose the due date at the end of the month, and I can assign that to all the members of the team. So I can give that to Dougie and myself to do, and I can then add that task. I can then go into the task and I can have a checklist. So if the checklist for Teams includes installing it and securing it, and whatever other tasks, I can show those tasks on the card. And then that means as a team, we can come into this and we can start to check things off as they get completed and then manage our tasks list. So it's a very easy way of managing the task list. And there's also a product that's being brought out, which is called To Do. So To Do basically is another Microsoft product that links with Planner, and it allows you to create a remote to-do list. So this platform basically would say, here, I've got a list of all the tasks assigned to me, and I can see these, and I can then right click on one and choose add to my day. And that then allows users to start to create a day plan based on the tasks that have been assigned to them. So the planner tool is a very good way of perhaps addressing how we can start to manage tasks and get people working effectively remotely.
Here, a quick question. Can someone outside of the organization be added to a team?
Yep. So if we go back into Teams, as I mentioned at the beginning, Teams is free for absolutely everybody at the moment. And what we can do is we can click on Add Member just here, and we can then search for somebody externally. So I have my Gmail account here, and I'm then able to add that person into the team. So effectively that person could start to work in this team. So it's really good for customers, suppliers. For example, we use an external marketing company. So we would add those people in, and they can then basically work in the same file section. So all the functionality I showed you is available to those people remotely as well. The next thing that we're able to do is we have a calendar functionality here. So this calendar is simply your Outlook calendar. So I wouldn't get too worried about this. It's not a shared calendar as it stands now. But what it does enable us to do is if I'm in a calendar on my PC within Outlook, I can actually come into here and I can do new Teams meeting. So what that will do is it will create a new Teams invite, and it will allow me then to join the people in who would like to join this meeting. So if you are trying to figure out what's the best way of doing client meetings, supplier meetings, that kind of thing, then the Teams functionality basically within Outlook would enable you to start getting people to join meetings and do that as well. There's an add-on, which I'll explain at the end, which also allows people to join via an audio conference. So if people don't want to join via the link, which they can do for free, they don't have to have Teams to join this. As you guys have all done today, you're able to join it. But we can also join via a phone number, and we're then able to join and participate that way as well. So the calendar functionality allows us to create a meeting and invite either internal people, partners, or clients into that. And we can also do, exactly as we're doing today, a live event. So a live event is what we've got at the moment, and that allows us to do a webinar. So if you're looking to do webinars with your clients, or perhaps an internal webinar, which wouldn't be too drastic in the current search situation, you might decide that you could use the same functionality I'm using now to do a company-wide announcement. So people, especially if you're in a large organization, they would be able to participate in this, and perhaps the CEO can distribute a video call, explain what's going on, and the Q&A functionality could then be used to help people with that as well. Within Teams itself, we've got lots of things that can help you actually use it. So obviously this is a new way of working. The activity one is key. So you can see Dougie messaged me here earlier on to say it will be done today. If I need to reference that back, I can click these three dots here and choose mark as unread. And what that means is when I come back into the team, I can go onto activity and I'll see that that's unread as well. And I can then say, right, Dougie, I can follow that message up. So if you're trying to find a way of marking messages unread so you can go back to them, that's how you would do that. We can also do searching. So if someone has put a file in, we could search for public liability, and then the searching functionality will come back and find all references to that. So obviously this is message based, but the search is very powerful, and I can then use these refiners such as from to search for, well, I know that Dougie was involved with it, and I can then start to scope exactly what's going on with that. So these filters allow us to do search for messages and then find those very easily as well. We also have the calls functionality.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
If somebody has SharePoint and is using it already, will it already be on the system, or will they have to move those files over into Teams?
So there is some quick ways. The best way would be to basically look at moving that SharePoint structure over into Teams, because it's much easier to manage. But the longer term way would be we can click on the add button in the top section here. And one of the tabs that we have is a document library. So if you have an existing document library that you'd like to bring in, you can then bring those in through this interface, and you can link your Teams to already existing SharePoint sites. Is there any other questions before I move on?
The others can wait.
Okay, cool. The other thing that we can do is in the top right hand corner, we can see here I've got a picture of myself. So it'd be very handy for you guys to upload your pictures so people can recognize who you are, especially if you are still recruiting new starters in the current climate. The pictures might help them understand who you are in the meantime. But what we can do is we can set different statuses. So you'll see the statuses can be automatic. Because I'm on this Teams webinar, it's automatically put me as in a call. But I can also set my status to busy. I can set it to do not disturb, and then I can set it to away. And I think people that are working remotely, I think these statuses are very, very handy to get your head around. Obviously, the idea of Teams is it's instant messaging. And if you're suddenly moving from a place where you're usually talking to people to working from home, you might find that the instant messages can be very distracting and it might affect your productivity. So I would recommend that using the do not disturb functionality when you're working on a piece of work can enable you to basically focus on that piece of work while you're waiting for that and not get distractions. So the do not disturb is a very good way of just keeping track of that. I can also set a status message. So if I'm working on something and I want people to see, I could go in here, for example, and I could say I'm at a client site today. It might take a while for me to come back to you. And I can set that to automatically clear. So it's a bit like an out of office for Teams. What I can also do, though, is I could just say working on a proposal. Might take a while for me to come back, and I can choose this show when people message me. So if one of my colleagues messages me, then they'll get a message to say, oh, it might take a while because he's working on a proposal. So that kind of functionality is important to get your head around and start to update your statuses to make sure you're productive. The other thing we've got in this download section is the ability to install it on different devices. Really, to get the best out of Microsoft Teams, I would recommend you install it on all of your devices. So I would recommend you install it on the desktop app, which is what I'm showing you here. I would also recommend that you install it on your mobile phones. That means you can access messages when you're on the move. It also means that if you have a trouble with your device, you can easily join meetings and use the functionality, including the web camera on your phone. So key really would be to start to use this on all the different devices that you have at the moment. The departments, obviously I've mentioned that each department you're a member of will appear down the left-hand side. We always advise companies that when they come to start to use Microsoft Teams, that you think about how those departments are going to work. By default, anyone can create a team, which is great initially. But what we find then is people start to lose control of the teams. So people might start to create too many teams. We might find that there's people create a finance team and someone creates an accounts team. So we would advise that we lock this functionality down so that you don't lose control and have people basically creating teams all over the place. There's 3 types of teams. There's a private team, which basically means that it's restricted. So that's very good for department areas like finance, HR, that kind of thing. There's a public team. This is good for general announcements. So perhaps you might have a football team if people are interested in that. You might have a mental health team. You can use these public teams for interests and allow people to join them. And an org-wide team can add everyone in your company into the team as well. So we recommend thinking about having a department team, one for each department. We would recommend looking at creating one for each project. These would fall under the private teams. We really recommend, especially now, that everyone thinks about creating an org-wide team. Now, an org-wide team means that everyone in your company would automatically be added to the team. And that means then we can use this functionality that we have in here to start to replace other emails that people would send out. So if you imagine you had your entire company in here, we can click the A down here, and we can then choose this to say announcement. So as an example here, we could say new starter, Hugh. I can then say welcome him to the company, and I can then tag the team if I wanted to, and I can say please welcome him today, and I can then start to craft a message. So all the emails that you send out at the moment, which are announcements, the new starters, internal comms, they can really be replaced with a company-wide team. And the advantage of that then is people can start to feed back. So with an email, if anyone has any comments, that's lost. It might reply to the email, but only one person gets it. With this, they can start to use the emojis. They can reply and say welcome. And they can even have a bit of fun. So there's the GIF functionality where they can sort of search for a relevant GIF and put that in as well. So really start to have a bit of fun with this. I mean, everyone's going to be working from home. They're probably going to feel a bit isolated. They're going to feel a bit cabin fever, probably. So if we can start to promote having a bit of fun, get some social engagement on there, that's going to lift people's spirits as we go through as well. We can also use the praise functionality. Sorry, Lisa, did you have a question?
Sorry, Hugh. How many people can you have in a Teams meeting?
Unlimited now. You can have as many as you want. So the other thing that we can do in here is we can praise. So if I wanted to praise people, especially now, we can say, right, someone's done a good job. I'm able to tag that person in here and say, great job, Dougie, and everyone can see that. So yeah, just to reiterate, I think there's 3 types of teams that would help you guys in the current situation. One for each department, a company-wide one, which you can use for comms and let people know what's going on, but also have fun with it. And then also create ones for projects that you're working on and try and get people working on in that manner of that as well. So that kind of is the overview of Microsoft Teams. So I hope everyone gets a good idea of how that works. And now we're going to move on to some of the tips and tricks that we have around implementing this remotely.
Before you go on, Hugh, maybe we can just clear up some of the questions that I've saved to the end. When somebody asks a question around the files, whether you can remove the document from the files section, and how do you remove it, or is only the person who created it allowed to move it? I'm assuming we talk about security.
Yeah, by default, anybody can edit and change and delete the files, but that can be changed in the settings. But by default, it's everyone can access and change those files, including delete them. But if needed, that could be changed.
And what about the comparison between using Yammer and company-wide teams?
Yeah, probably controversial maybe for people that are using Yammer heavily, but there's a lot of companies that will see the functionality that exists within Teams is very, very similar to Yammer. So we've certainly seen organizations question why they would want to deploy 2 applications that do something very similar. So yes, certainly this platform may be a viable alternative.
Okay, and then when you talked about being able to lock matters down to stop too many teams being created, how do you do that?
So that's something that we could probably send over afterwards. So if someone wanted to get in touch at the end, we can send it over. There's a piece of PowerShell command that you would need to run. So there's no easy way, I'm afraid, but we can help you with that.
What about the question around storage limits, Hugh, on Teams?
So Teams would get 1 terabyte of storage. So everybody would have 1 terabyte of storage. So that basically means that you've got a lot of storage out of the box, and every licensed user also adds an additional 10 gigabytes as well.
Perfect. We'll ask you some more at the end.
Cool, brilliant. So jumping back into the presentation. So some of the settings that we'd recommend if you're looking to very quickly deploy Microsoft Teams. So the first thing is that you should check over the settings that exist in the admin center. So there's a whole host of settings that exist that you should get your IT administrator, if you have one, or your existing provider or us to help you out and have a look at those settings and make sure they're secure. As an example, some people will almost certainly want the external sharing feature turned on, but there's also companies out there that definitely won't want the external sharing turned on. So I would advise that everyone goes away today and at least takes a glance through the available Teams settings, which I can show you briefly here. This is the Teams Admin Center. And as we go through, you'll see there's hundreds of different settings that are available that relate to all sorts, but almost certainly the ones under org-wide settings, including external access and guest access and team settings, you guys are going to want to take a quick look over those and make sure they're suitable for your company. The second thing is deploy on all devices. So again, to get the most out of this platform, I would recommend that everyone who's using it installs it on their phones, their tablets, their PCs, because the whole beauty of this platform is that you can be on the move and you can access your phone, and also you can join from your phone as well. All of the functionality that I'm showing you basically can be used easily on the phone. And yeah, the hardware is basically provide hardware. So if you can provide hardware to users, they can obviously use their built-in cameras on their PC, but I would recommend that you consider looking at getting them headsets and web cameras, just so they can get the most out of the platform and they can start to use their headsets. A really good tool because it just means that they can focus. I would also recommend that you train your users. So obviously today, a lot of people have joined this session, but I would recommend that you pass this knowledge on and perhaps look at dedicated training to get people up to speed with how to do this and how they can go through the process. We also recommend that you guide your users, which is something we'll cover off on the next slide, and also potentially look at a specialist. So obviously you guys can look at these settings and you can configure them, but always a specialist will know the best way to set it up, and perhaps a short piece of guidance from them might be better than trying to figure it all out on your own. Now, one of the most effective things that we've seen for remote working is to sit down with your departments and try to map out how that department can work remotely. So today and now is a perfect opportunity for you guys to start to sit down with the departments and say, right, we're going to move to working from home. So what does that mean? How do we currently work, and how does that translate to Microsoft Teams? So we build with some of the organizations that we work with what we call a cheat sheet. So this is a very simple version of the cheat sheet. And the idea of the cheat sheet is basically we've been through a brainstorming session with that department, and we've basically said, right, how do you guys currently work? Really common one is daily catch-ups. So lots of people currently do daily catch-ups in the morning and the afternoon, where they will sit down and basically discuss what the plan is for the day, any issues, that kind of thing. Now, with Microsoft Teams, that's obviously really, really easy to do and implement. So it would be simple for you guys to create a Microsoft team. It would then be easy to create a new thread, and we could call this the morning catch up. We can then tag the entire team onto there, and we can say call at 8:30, please all join. And using the video icon at the bottom, I'm able then to start a video chat with everyone in the team. So we find one of the best things that you guys can do working from home is to have a daily catch up with your team. So at the start of every day, get everyone on a video call, either in the whole company, if you're small enough, or in the department, and basically just have conversations, catch up on the previous night, have a bit of social engagement, but also then get people into the mind of working. So what are you doing today? Have you got any issues I can help with? These daily catch-ups we find are essential when we're working remotely and working from home. And we do those 3 times a day. We do them in the morning, we do one at lunchtime, which is more of a social time, and then we do one in the afternoon. And we basically then, it's an opportunity for people to catch up, people to talk about any problems they have, and basically just, as I mentioned before, not feel as if they're isolated and in cabin fever mode, but they're able actually to talk to people. We could also do a weekly catch up. So that's a similar process, but a weekly catch-up perhaps is longer. You might invite more people, it might be cross-department. And we would also recommend that that is recorded. So as you'll find today, we can record these sessions. And if it's recorded and someone isn't able to join, that means they can simply play back the video and see what they'd missed. So it's a very good way of basically being able to keep people up to speed without having to repeat yourself. And they can then go back and play the videos and see what was going on there. One of the mindsets for Teams is to replace internal emails. So make that clear to the department that let's stop sending internal emails. We're actually going to use this platform. We, again, as an organization, mainly use Microsoft Teams, and we have a clear boundary that Teams is used for 99% of things, and we only use emails when it's more formal. So perhaps if we're doing an appraisal or a disciplinary, we still use the email channel there because it feels more formal. But everything else, we make it clear to funnel through. Obviously, some of the other tips that we've been through are basically sort of making sure that we're making most of external meetings. So get your clients and your partners involved and start to use the external meetings. And also look at the tabs and start mapping out the Microsoft tabs that are available. Perhaps Planner can be used, perhaps the wiki can be used, that kind of thing. I think the key with the cheat sheet and this process is don't let your department find their own way. They will find their own way, but you can probably get a jump start now by thinking about these key topics and saying, right, this is how we should work, and creating a simple document that outlines that for people. And that's then putting a structure in place that quickly keeps them effective, as opposed to it being that they find it naturally. Any questions on that, Lisa?
A couple that might not reference particularly to this slide, but one of the questions was around, do you recommend that organizations use an alias for Teams? So, for instance, an alias address where for every team, it creates its own address that can then be referenced.
Yeah, so back on the teams, we think it's important to create naming standards for teams. So if you create a team like finance, that will consume an email address called finance@ and then your email address. We create naming standards where we have demo. We can prefix some with ext, which indicates they're external sharing. So we do recommend that part of the process you think about the naming standards for teams and don't just create them all ad hoc.
Thank you. I've got one question here for you, Hugh, before you go on to governance. It's around adding Planner specific to a team. Does it create an underlying group in Office 365? Groups can get quite unwieldy, some of our audience feels.
No, when you create a planner from Teams, it creates a planner associated to that team, so it wouldn't create another group.
Thank you, Hugh.
Okay, cool. Really, sort of next slide is more of an administrative type function. So governance is something that you usually have to think about and get in place. So it might be something that you guys start to think about adopting over time. But as I mentioned, some of the key areas that you need to think about, the first one is team settings. So there's a whole host of settings that I showed earlier in the Microsoft Teams Admin Center that really you need to go through and just make sure that you're happy with those settings. The second one is security. So if you're starting with Office 365 and you don't have some of the security tools that are in place, such as conditional access, you just need to be wary that if you start to copy your files off a network drive, just think about the impact that has. Just make sure that the people in the team should have that information. Make sure that the where you're copying it to is okay. So I just think you need to consider the security aspect, and there's a whole host of security tools that are available, which we covered on other webinars, such as conditional access and Azure Information Protection, that can be added to Microsoft Teams that provide a much greater level of security. So if you're interested in those products, I would recommend getting in touch after this to go through them. Adoption is key. So obviously, as I mentioned, we want to get people using this platform. So we need to consider the training aspect of it. I think it's really critical that you guys build that platform, you show people how to use it, but you then provide them training so they understand how to use it and tag and all that kind of stuff. The devices obviously are key as well. So if you can get hold of devices at the moment, then I would recommend that you basically purchase devices and get them set up so they can start to feel part of the team using their web cameras and stuff. And then finally, just make sure that the external sharing settings are secure. So there is a lot of settings in the background, and I would recommend that you check in the Teams Admin Center that external sharing is set to as you need. Okay, so the other product that's available as an add-on to Microsoft Teams is the telephony piece. So we've certainly had a lot of requests around Microsoft Business Voice because we've got people that have legacy phone systems. So they're not able to access their phone systems easily. They're not able to access them while they're on the move. They're trying to use VPN solutions, and it's very, very difficult. So one of the platform add-ons available is the Microsoft Teams Business Voice. So what this basically does is it adds a new tab here called Calls. We can then basically assign a number. So that number can be any city pretty much in the UK, and it can also be used internationally. And it then allows us to send and receive voice calls. So if anyone was to dial this number, I would receive the call on my mobile or whatever devices that Teams set up on. And I can also then send a call. So if you are struggling to get people and you're struggling to call, then you may want to investigate the business voice aspect. And the other cool thing that we can do with the business voice in here is within the call section, we can set up different rules. So I can actually have it if someone calls my DDI, that it also calls my mobile number at the same time, or I can set it to forward calls to a different number. So if I know I'm not going to be able to access Teams for whatever reason, you can set up your own routing to say, I want to route this to somewhere else. And you can also then configure a voicemail. And one cool feature that's available within here is we have the ability to set your voicemail as an out-of-office greeting. So if you set an out-of-office calendar on, if you set an out-of-office on Outlook, then that will automatically then play the message from your Microsoft Teams voicemail. So it kind of simplifies the ability to create voicemails. The actual business voice plan is an add-on that's available for Microsoft 365 Business. And that cost of that is £12 per user per month. So if you guys need a phone system and you need to get something in quickly, this license here is a very, very easy way of doing that. It enables us to add a full phone system. It enables the audio conferencing, which is the ability for people to dial in to Microsoft Teams meeting. And if you do international calling, we also have the ability then to enable an add-on for international calling. So kind of to wrap up the presentation and just moving on to some different tips that are available. The first one, obviously, install Microsoft Teams, get it set up on all your devices so you're able to start participating in meetings. Perhaps following today, book a call and a video meeting with your colleagues, start to test this functionality, see how well it works. Moving on from that, look at starting a Teams meeting. So perhaps tomorrow, if you're all working from home, set up a Teams meeting and drag your team into it and start to see how well that works and if it increases the productivity. Number 4, create a department cheat sheet. So that we find is really key. Rather than people finding their own way, try and map that process for them so they can clearly see, this is how we should use it, and create a simple guide for them to move forward with. And then number 5, book a Teams training session. So if you feel today that you've got enough from it, but you'd like to get some more training, we also offer a Teams training session, which we'll cover more detail at the end. Microsoft have released some tips. So down the left-hand side, you'll see here, and we can distribute this. It's also available on LinkedIn quite easily, about how to set up a remote working checklist. So set up your workspace, communicate as often as you can, create healthy boundaries, embrace online meetings, and then we've got some of our own tips here. So taking breaks is really important. You'll find if you're working from home all day, you might not even leave your desk. So I think it's a really good tip to make sure you're taking breaks. Maybe make you force yourself to go out for a walk. Don't just sit there all day, and try and promote that getting up and moving around. Obviously, use Microsoft Teams effectively and the 365 platform wider by using Planner and To-Do. And just try and promote the social bit. So don't just have everyone trying to work and send emails. Definitely try and incorporate the teams to have fun. So use the GIFs, try and send announcements, and just have a bit of fun rather than it all being work. The final thing, really, before we move on to any final questions, is we're hosting Microsoft Teams training. So we're offering at a discounted rate for any organisation that would like to get Teams training. For the cost of £600 inclusive of VAT, you can invite your entire company onto this Teams training. So if you're looking for a quick way of getting everybody up to speed, this might be a really good way of getting everyone involved in a Teams training session. And we'll also be creating a recording of that Teams training to help people with that. And we'll be covering basically Teams user training from start to finish. So by the end of that training, people will be able to hopefully use Teams effectively. So if anybody's interested in that, then get in touch, or we'll also send an email at the end. And then that leaves us for questions and answers, if there's any more. Lisa?
I have one from Sanj, who's been very patient, and it talks about the synchronization. Is there any idiosyncrasies around the right to accept or reject those changes once a synchronization has been done?
Sometimes if someone's made the same change as you, so if someone's edited the same area, you'll find that they may you lose the changes, so you might have to create a copy. Generally, it's pretty good. You have the ability to approve or reject which changes you'd like to do.
Okay, and then we've got a suggestion, or really a question, around whether Teams could be used as a virtual classroom, obviously really pertinent to the COVID environment right now.
Say that again, sorry, Lisa.
Can Teams be used as a virtual classroom?
Yeah, so if you're a school that's joined this session, then there is 100% a full classroom capability. So Microsoft Teams has something called Microsoft Teams Classrooms, and that revolves completely around building a classroom for schools. So it has the ability to create assessments. A wiki obviously can be used to put the class notes, and then all of the video communication can be used to host the videos. So it definitely is possible to build a virtual classroom.
Okay, so that's that for Hugh. You've done all of the questions and answers. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. And if anyone has any questions, just get in touch. We'll be happy to help. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Hugh.